back for another episode of Inside Sports Fantasy Football. It's Gerald Glassford coming right back at you again from Pop Culture Cosmos and also Inside Sports. And along with me for this broadcast is once again, he is one of the great guys that belongs to The Voice from the Underground, the podcast. You got to check it out today on all major podcast platforms, whether you like pop culture, whether you like great talk, whether you like politics, even if you like cigars. It's a show you got to listen to today, The Voice from the Underground. It's my good friend, Mr. Jasen Dutch. What's up, man?
What's up?
Always great to have you on the show. I spoke to one of your fellow hosts, Mr. TJ Johnson.
Yes.
He's going to be on later this week on our new Lakers Fast Break podcast. So stay tuned for that if you're tuning in to Spotify or Anchor and checking that out. That's Lakers Fast Break. But I'm here with you, my friend, and we're not talking politics. We're not talking any pop culture. We're not talking about any of that stuff. We can, but that would be like 2-3 hours later. And I know you got to get some sleep, my friend. So we're talking about week 2 in the NFL. It just ended. A lot went on as far as newsworthy, but I think it starts as far as the headlines are concerned. Before any standout performances, we've got to talk about some major injuries at a position of need for everybody, and that's the quarterback.
Yeah. Wow. You know, so we lost Nick Foles first, obviously, before this, and then we lost Ben Roethlisberger and Drew Brees. Now, Ben Roethlisberger's already been put on IR, and Drew Brees, it's sort of sketchy at this moment.
Yeah, he's seeing a hand specialist from last time I heard.
Yeah, and the guy couldn't pick up a football, so I don't know what you're going to do, but.
And then on top of all that, the New York Jets have lost their second quarterback.
Yeah, well, who cares? If that's a team that you should be avoiding for most positions outside of Le'Veon Bell and Robbie Anderson, I don't really think that too many players in the Jets are of too much interest. But yeah, the Jets also had and hit on a foul on a play that ended up being a penalty as well versus the Cleveland Browns. So that was that looked pretty grody. The Simeon one. It did not look good for him. He looks like he might be gone for the rest of the year.
Yeah, he was a confirmed out for the season with severely torn ligaments in his ankle. And if you
I didn't even see that.
Yeah,
I just guessed it.
Yeah, we didn't have to guess very hard if you saw that video on Twitter, watching his ankle go in 15 different directions as it was being smooshed under his own leg with the help of Myles Garrett right there for you. So.
Yeah, that one was painful though. It wasn't quite to the level of
Joe Theismann.
Remember the guy from Louisville, the basketball player?
Oh yeah.
A few years back. That one I forgot. He was a pro prospect, man. That one was awful, but
Gordon Hayward's was pretty nasty too, where his foot was just that one. But Joe Theismann, I think, is the most famous one because ABC kept on, if you remember, replaying it and replaying it and replaying it.
That was kind of the first time that happened.
Pretty much on camera, yeah.
Back in the 80s. So, but yeah. So what do we do? What do we do?
Well, you got two options, my friend. Right now, on most waiver wires, there are still some attractions available, and I know we talked about some of those candidates last week, but before we go into that, how about trades? What do you think as far as trades that you might be going for, as far as ones that quarterbacks that are not actually starting most games, but maybe a really solid backup that people may be interested in selling at this point in time?
A backup quarterback?
Yeah, let's say on someone's team. Like, for instance, mine, I've got Aaron Rodgers as my backup right now.
Oh, backup on your fantasy team. Okay.
Yeah, so I mean, because most teams carry at least one, at least one extra on their team.
Yeah, okay. So funny story. I have Ben Roethlisberger in 2 leagues, and one of them is a keeper league. So in a keeper league, just by the dynamics of that animal, and also we can start 2 quarterbacks. We have a super flex position. So you start 1 quarterback and then you can start a second quarterback. So almost all of the teams have 4 QBs on the roster. There are some teams that have 5. I went with 3. So in this league, I had Goff, Roethlisberger, and Kyler Murray. Suffice to say, even though I believe I have by far the best team in that division, in that league, I am now 0-2 because Jared Goff and Ben Roethlisberger have done jack zero. Ben Roethlisberger now is out. So now I'm in a position where people are sending me trades, and they're sending me trades like, Teddy Bridgewater for Michael Thomas. And I'm like, I posted in the board, I said, look, don't send me your mid to low tier quarterbacks for studs, because it ain't going to happen. I'd rather go 0-16. I'd rather start a kicker at my super flex position than trade you Michael Thomas for Teddy Bridgewater or whatever other mid to low, Eli Manning or whoever the hell it is you feel like offering me. So that's the thing. I mean, it doesn't hurt to try to, to smell blood in the water and maybe try to go, and grab and make a trade with somebody who may have lost Roethlisberger. Probably have more luck with Breeze, because I think in most leagues, you're going to have 10, 12 guys. Roethlisberger was right there around, 10, ranked 10, 11-ish in most leagues. So it's possible that whoever has Roethlisberger didn't have him as their starting quarterback anyway. So, it's going to depend on different leagues and how that manager's strategy was. But it is very possible that you might not get as much from the owner of Roethlisberger, unless, of course, they had Breeze and Roethlisberger, which I'm sure some people did. Breeze, on the other hand, I think that owner might be panicking a little bit more for the short term, but also he's not out for the year. So in most leagues, unlike my Dynasty League, you're going to have 8 or 9 or 10 quarterbacks available. So what I did is I'm in a standard 12-team league, and right now the available quarterbacks in that league, which I obviously know that they will be different in every league, but as of at the moment, I have Allen from Buffalo, Winston from Tampa Bay, Rudolph from Pittsburgh, Bridgewater, Daniel Jones from the Giants, Case Keenum, Joe Flacco, Marcus Mariota, and I like to call him Fish Sticks Patrick, who you don't want. So those are the guys that are available at quarterback. So you have, assuming most leagues are going to be somewhere in that same vicinity, you might have, 1 or 2 extra guys that are available in your league, or 1 or 2 less. But I think that most leagues are going to have around that, assuming that you have 1 quarterback starting. So with that being said, which of those guys are you going to pick up?
One person you don't want to pick up is Eli Manning, who just lost his job to Daniel Jones.
You definitely don't want to pick up Eli Manning, though Eli Manning probably was somebody's backup. I'm sure he'll be being dropped. But Daniel Jones, if he's available in your league, might not be a bad one. In fact, I have Roethlisberger in that league where I just read. Also, I have him in 2 leagues. Yay for me. So I have to, of course, I'm 0-2 in both leagues because of Roethlisberger. But I'm trying to figure out right now who I'm going to pick up. So luckily I have Tom Brady in that league too, but both weeks I went with Roethlisberger. Not anymore. But yeah, it's a difficult situation. I think that Allen from Buffalo is probably the guy who has the best short term. And again, I know last week I was saying how I'm not a big fan, and I'm still not, but he is young and he does have legs. So, there is some good potential there. Daniel Jones, I have to look at very strongly too, because, you got Saquon Barkley in the backfield. He's a young rookie. He's got a probably lower than mediocre receiving core, but I think that the kid's got some talent. So those are probably the 2 that I would say I'm leaning towards the most at this moment, towards picking up. But you never know until you hit the transaction button.
Well, I'll tell you what, one player that is available in a lot of leagues out there, and they need to pick him up off the waiver wire, is somebody that's performing even better than Josh Allen right now, and that's Case Keenum out of Washington. He's 5 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, got a very high rating. He's right now the 5th rated quarterback in the NFL. While I don't think it'll stay that way for even maybe 2, 3, 4 more games, it's still someone that I think that can actually provide you decent numbers. And if you're in a pinch, if you're out Roethlisberger or Breeze and or both at this point in time, if you have Eli Manning who's now on the bench, if you had bad luck with quarterbacks, at least it's somewhere to start with him, Josh Allen, like you said, or even Matthew Stafford or Andy Dalton. There's still enough quarterbacks out there on the waiver wire, I think, that you can at least pick up someone that can do you some decent numbers.
Yeah, I mean, that's the good thing is that position, you probably have some ability to save yourself. Most other positions are going to be a little bit more difficult. It's going to be more of a crapshoot. But with quarterback, typically in most teams, even if it's a 12-team league, you're going to have 4 or 5 quarterbacks that are at least are going to be able to fill in for you on your bye weeks. We're going to assume that your backup quarterback is better than most of the guys on the waiver wire and that you're going to start them. I am not really big on Case Keenum. I refuse to drink that Kool-Aid. I refuse to buy on that. I just don't see that continuing. Kirk Cousins is a far better quarterback than Case Keenum is to my eye. And with ultimately the same cast of characters over there, it didn't really do a ton. So I'm not really too big on Case Keenum at the moment. But, if you are, then great. You can go for it. I just don't think that you're going to get 2.5 touchdowns per week as an average from him. I would say that an average game from Case Keenum is probably going to be 175 to 235 yards, 1.2 touchdowns. In other words, he'll get 1, 1, 2, 1, 1, 2. So that's where I'm at on Case Keenum. I think Allen makes up for a little bit more than that because of the fact that he has those legs. And, he's got a couple of rushing scores already. So, and it seems like Buffalo might be better than what we thought they were. Singletary's looked pretty good in the backfield as well. And he's got some receivers that at least are catching the ball when he's throwing it to them. So, I certainly would probably err on the side of caution and go with Allen over Case Keenum. We've seen Case Keenum for years, and he's Case Keenum. He was this way in Denver. He's this way here, and he'll have a good game here and again. But I don't know. I'm not personally sold on him.
We'll be right back with more fantasy football. Listen up, all you gamers out there. Miracle Fruit Oil is ramping up the deals on its awesome Vitabrace gaming wristband. Vitabrace is clinically proven to help improve your gaming performance. Vitabrace will help you achieve your gaming goals, whether it's that single-player campaign, retro classic, or battle royale. Head on over today to miraclefruitoil.com, and if you use the code Vitabrace50, you'll get half off on a Vitabrace gaming wristband, or use the code Buy One Get One, and it's buy one, get one free. That's right, just use the code Vitabrace50 or buy and the number one, get and the number one today to get some great deals on some Vitabrace gaming wristbands. So check it out today at miraclefruitoil.com. Vitabrace, win with it. Once again, I'm talking to Jasen Dutch from Voice from the Underground. You got to check it out today on all major podcast networks. My friend, I'm going to ask you right now when it comes to week 2 in the NFL, were there any standouts to you as far as something that maybe surprised you, somebody that maybe gained back to form after a week 1 that was not really up to snuff or what you thought that you were expecting out of them? Was there something that surprised you, or is there something out of week 2 that really sticks out to you as far as the performance was concerned?
Well, first of all, Dak Prescott did it again. So that was interesting.
That's right. He didn't really have, at least based off of the previous year's performance, that consistency, that level of it anyways. But, a new season could go back to his rookie form.
Standard ESPN scoring right now, number 1 and number 2 ranked players are Lamar Jackson and Dak Prescott. Holy cow. So who would have thought that they'd be above Patrick Mahomes and company? But they are. And I mean, it's week 2. So, that's not going to last for the entire year. But like I said, Lamar Jackson like I said last week, he could be the truth. He's certainly looking sensational and just a great kid. I really am starting to like this kid a lot. I'm not usually a fan of having running quarterbacks as my starter, typically. But I do think that in a case like what we talked about with Allen, where it could give you some benefit over, a guy like Case Keenum. But in the case of Lamar Jackson, I mean, this kid, he's kind of reminding me a little bit of Michael Vick. It's pretty wild. So, he's been really good. Dak Prescott, again, been very, very good. Patrick Mahomes is doing good as well. I think a couple of the guys that you might not may not be household names. Boyd from Cincinnati.
As someone who we thought after that big game would be set up for a hard fall.
Mm-hmm.
You know what? He's still going strong. AJ Green, when he comes back into the lineup.
And Ross, too.
John Ross. That's right. Yeah. They're performing very well. Andy Dalton has got Andy Dalton's second in the league in passing yards. And I got to see when AJ Green comes back how much of the offense. I'm still convinced that he is still their primary ball receiver when he comes back into the lineup. We'll see how that works out with the Cincinnati receiving corps.
Yeah, but Ross had another big week. So, and again, this is not a good football team. There's a football team that's going to be behind the vast majority of the time. So, they're going to be throwing the ball pretty much the whole game. One guy that I think is worth talking about, well, actually two guys that are worth talking about. Number one, Deebo Samuel from the 49ers. He had a pretty good week this week, and I think Deebo Samuel is somebody who it's very possible is on your waiver wire. He is a very talented receiver. They spent a high draft pick on him. Was amazing in college. He's got really good hands. He moves well. He's fast. Deebo Samuel, and especially on that particular team, they're in they're in a division where there's going to be a lot of high scoring football games played. And I think that Deebo Samuel is somebody that you should be taking a look at. And if you have Deebo Samuel, I have him in one league, and I'm really thinking that I might have to start him. Another guy is a guy that I suggested people pick up last week, and I hope you listened, is with Mostert. Mostert had just a ridiculous game this week. Now, he was not the only running back in that backfield that had a big game this week as well. But, we're talking about the same team here with Deebo Samuel. So, they had two running backs that did quite well, but I think Mostert is the guy who's going to be carrying the bulk of the load for the majority of the year, at least until Tevin Coleman comes back. And even I think after Tevin Coleman comes back, I don't see Tevin Coleman doing anything other than as a change of pace, maybe vulture a couple of goal line carries. But Mostert is, if Raheem Mostert is still in your free agency list, he's a must own at this point. He's the first really of the running backs, I think, that, we're going to be discovered this year. Thankfully, I found him early and scooped him up in all of my leagues, and I'm feeling pretty good. Even though I didn't start him this week on any leagues, I'm feeling very good about that. So take a look at your waiver wire and see if he's out there, because he's looking like he's going to be the truth too.
All right, and those are some great performances and standouts. I agree with you on a lot of those picks right there for you. And definitely, if you did not hear what Jason had to say last week about some of the picks, or maybe just kind of brushed it off, but he was right on the money on a couple of them. So you got to go ahead and listen to what he has to say, because there's some really sound reasoning there as far as some of the choices. And if you see any of those players on the waiver wire, maybe it's about time you go ahead and get them, because we're getting to a point where savvy owners are hitting that waiver wire. Myself, since I'm at the bottom of my waiver wire list, I can go ahead and just pick off anybody I want to go ahead. And if nobody else is going after him, I'm going to get him, because I'm not worried about where I'm at as far as on the waiver wire. So that's, to me, it's just, if you have an opportunity to go to the waiver wire, make an effort to do so, because you're just selling yourself short. You fill up that roster. Maybe a quality bench player, maybe that bench player that you put on there, or somebody that you can start in a flex or whatnot off the waiver wire. Maybe it's only going to last you a couple games, maybe 3, maybe 4, maybe an entire season. But right now, you got to go ahead and jump on those players, because as the weeks go by on the waiver wire, it starts to thin out, and it gets harder and harder to find quality players to fill into that roster. And you're going to have to look more and more into a trade that'll actually hurt your roster, because you're going to have to give up something to get something back, and that's going to make it hurt even more.
Can I reply to that?
Of course.
I totally disagree with you.
Wow.
So, and I love you, Gerald. I do. Number one waivers are gold.
But I'm number 10.
Okay. Oh, you're number 10. Okay.
Yeah, I'm number 10 out of 10, and it started out that way.
Yeah, shoot from the hip. It's fine. But if you have the number one waiver, unless you...
Well, you said that before.
Even if you have a quarterback, even if you had Roethlisberger or Breeze, I have Breeze or Roethlisberger, as I said, I'm not using a waiver transaction on Josh Allen. Yeah, the other Josh. I'm not going to waste. I have the second waiver priority in that league. I am not wasting it on him because, if somebody else picks him up, okay, then I'll go with one of the other quarterbacks that's available because there's like 7. And he's not going to be my number one starter anyway. Tom Brady's going to be my number one starter. I like to work my way up in the waiver. And if you find yourself, because the one position that's going to always become available, I'm going to beat this like a dead horse, is going to be running back. Somebody's going to get hurt. Week 3, week 4, week 5, week 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Somebody's going to get hurt. And if it comes down to somebody like, say, maybe not Barkley, because, even if Barkley did get hurt, obviously you'd have, a guy that you'd want to pick up because he's going to get those carries, but nobody's going to replace Barkley numbers. But if someone like maybe, say, Nick Chubb or something of that matter was to get hurt, now that's an offense. They're going to run the ball with whomever. We saw this last year with Damian Williams. When Kareem Hunt got suspended, Damian Williams just filled into that role immediately. So you have to look for it from certain teams. Not just any running back is going to do good in any situation, but you will definitely find guys who can be starters for you as the season progresses. So don't waste those number ones. Now, if you're 7, 8, 9, 10, then, go for it. You use the waiver as you might, especially if you're number 10. What have you got to lose? Nothing. So go for it.
No, and if there's anybody else that's inactive, I would never get up a whole lot higher because you're talking about all the other teams would have to go ahead and act. And as you know, and as you've experienced over the course of playing many years in fantasy football, not every owner stays active beyond week 2, week 3, week 4. So I don't expect my slot on the waiver wire list to move up any closer to maybe 6, 5, even 4 if I was, not touching it at all. So if you're number 10 or number 9 like I am or way at the bottom, number 11, 12, by all means, if you see those players now that you need to go ahead and take a chance at, by all means. But like you said, you might need to save that one, number 2 or number 3 waiver spot that's much higher for a rainy day. And right now, I don't see any team out there on fantasy football that it's really pouring to the extent that they have to go ahead and burn a waiver wire spot right now. That at least that high, anyways.
What's funny is what player was owned by the most winning fantasy teams?
What's that?
Last week.
Who's that?
The freaking Patriots defense. Unbelievable. The Patriots defense. The Patriots defense. Teams that owns the Patriots defense won 77% of their games last week.
I believe it. As Chris Sardieri says, they were playing against the NFL's JV team last week.
Oh, the Dolphins are atrocious, but you had 2 defensive touchdowns and a shutout. So depending on your scoring system, the league that I went against them in, they scored 49 points. So that's a different scoring. They give you slightly higher scores there, so it's sort of an anomaly. But on I think ESPN Standard they scored 27 or 29 points. So you're going to get that out of your defense, man. But of course you can't bank on that because next week the Patriots will get 2. I streamed the Dallas defense last week. And they got me 1 point, but I knew they were going to win, and it was a tasty matchup from what I looked at. And you never know. Defense is so. Honestly, I'm kind of against defense being in fantasy because it's just too unpredictable. I'm a big fan of IDP, so one of my leagues is IDP. But yeah, the defenses is always. You definitely don't use your waiver transaction on a defense.
We'll be right back with more fantasy football.
Hey, listener, Dutch here from Voice from the Underground, the podcast. My co-host and I want to invite you to check out our little corner of the podcast verse. At Voice from the Underground, we talk about all the crazy happening around us and try to make a little bit of sense out of the nonsense with little to no results. If the idea of hearing 3 semi-intelligent, outspoken nerds talk about politics, social issues, current events, sports, movies, pretty much anything that we decide to talk about because, well, it's our show, appeals to you, grab your shovel and come on down to the underground, and then consult a qualified psychotherapist. Find us wherever you get your podcasts, just not where you buy your weed.
Voice from the Underground.
One last thing before we head on out, and that is we're going to play a little game called Buy or Sell. And I want to know if you're going to be buying or selling on these players that I'm going to hit you up with right now. Let's start with Marquise Brown of Baltimore.
So, 18 points, I want to say, standard scoring. I have to double check on that. Honestly, I don't. First of all, the mustache is throwing to him, and I love the mustache, but it's interesting because I just don't see him as being a breakout receiver. I would probably say, I'm indifferent on him. I honestly am. I don't have all the facts on that particular guy. He's not somebody that I've researched too much. I do like the QB throwing to him now. The mustache, as I'm going to call him forever. But I really can't make a great comment on him, unfortunately, because I don't have all of the facts. From what I have seen, it's relatively indifferent. He isn't anything to stand out.
Okay. Buy or sell Marlon Mack out of Indiana, running back.
Sell. Marlon Mack. Marlon Mack is a guy who, honestly, I've never cared for, especially on that team without Andrew Luck. And, it seems to me like Jacoby Brissett is in love with T.Y. Hilton already. I'm just not a huge Marlon Mack guy. I think that right now you could probably get a lot for Marlon Mack, but I just don't see Marlon Mack as being a guy who's gonna get you, who's gonna win you a championship. I just don't. The performances have been, up and down throughout his entire, not just this year, but throughout his entire career. Marlon Mack is a guy who will get you, 18 points, then 7 points, 18 points, 7 points. And I guess you can live with that, but there's far better options out there than Marlon Mack. And if you can find somebody who's willing to trade you a top receiver for Marlon Mack or something like that, someone that's going to be a little bit more consistent, I would certainly go ahead and do that. Cause I've just, I'm weird when it comes to fantasy. Like I go a lot off of feeling and a lot off of just, do I like the guy? Sometimes he has a good football name, like AJ Brown, right? I want him because he's got a great freaking football name. Means nothing, but somehow it works out for me. And Marlon Mack is just, the kid's good. I don't want to poop on him too much, but I would definitely be looking elsewhere with Marlon Mack. I do not see him as a RB1 or RB2, and I know that's what he is listed as. So I would personally sell.
Because he's listed
probably
right
not
now
popular.
He's listed right now as number 3 in rushing yardage at this point in time.
Yeah, but that's not going to continue on that team. That team's not good. They got lucky and played Tennessee. You know what I mean? And I thought Tennessee was going to be so it's the Colts are not going to be playing from behind 85% of the time. And Marlon Mack is not known for being a great pass catching running back. I don't believe, unless I completely lost the boat on that. He doesn't stand out to me as one of those guys. So, but again, I've never liked him, so I've never drafted him. So, you know what I mean? It's just not a guy he's just not a guy who's been sexy to me. And the Colts are not going to finish over 500. I'm sorry. So if you're looking at a 5 to 6 win team, if they do better, great for them. They shock me, but I don't see that happening. So running backs who are not named Saquon Barkley on bad teams are probably not people that you want to attach the horse to.
Let's go back to Baltimore. Mark Andrews, tight end.
So I looked at him earlier. Mark Andrews is actually available in one of my leagues, and I was looking at him because I have OJ Howard. And it's funny because if you would have even asked me 2 days ago, would I consider dropping OJ Howard, who's probably one of the most talented tight ends in football, for this Mark Andrews character, I would have been like, no, there's no way that I'm going to do that. But OJ Howard just was invisible. He was totally invisible on Thursday night. And he was, frankly, invisible week 1 as well. A little bit better game, but didn't really do much. Mark Andrews, here's the beautiful thing about Andrews. The guy who's throwing them the ball, right? The guy who's throwing the ball is going to create opportunities specifically for the tight end. For some reason, I think he did have 2 touchdowns. I think he might have had a touchdown called back, because I'm almost positive I remember seeing him.
Well, he has 2 touchdowns on the season, and he's 8th in receiving yards at this point in time.
I'm almost positive I saw him score twice last week. It may have been that they were showing a replay of something, but because I was watching Red Zone. I love Red Zone, by the way. If you're not watching Red Zone, Red Zone's like the best for fantasy football players. But I could have swore maybe he had one called back. But, he's open in space. Lamar is going to find him. He's not. Lamar is not really a guy, I think, that has the arm strength to throw the ball down the field all that much. He's definitely not a weak-armed quarterback. I don't want to characterize him as that. But as far as, when you have a quarterback who has those type of legs, he's going to draw that linebacker. And when he draws that linebacker as that spy, that automatically means what you're going to do one of two things. You're going to have to put your safety or a cornerback onto your tight end. And usually that's not going to be a horrific matchup for either one of those guys, because most tight ends are going to be lined up, typically with a linebacker. The case with Andrews, though, is that Andrews, when he was covered by a cornerback last week, I want to say it was that 6 of his catches came when he was lined up against a cornerback. And the reason being is because obviously the linebackers were spying on Lamar Jackson. So why is that important? It's important because he's taller, he's bigger, and he's got really good hands. And he's, if the safety's coming in, if the free safety's coming in from behind the defense and has to come up to get to him, by the time he's already gone 5 or 6 or 7 yards and run that slant or that post route, then he's going to be wide open, and there's nothing that they're going to be able to do. And then it's not going to net you. He's not going to run downfield. He's not going to score you a 70-yard touchdown. But in PPR, which most of us are playing these days, this guy looks like he might be a lock for 5 to 7 catches every single week, and probably somewhere in the 8 target range. So Lamar Jackson is completely creating this guy's opportunities. And I had no clue who this guy was on draft day. I admit it. I had no idea who he was when I drafted. He wasn't even on my radar. But he's just looked fantastic, and I'm in buy mode on Mark Andrews right now.
Last one I've got for you,
mm-hmm.
and this one's going to be a fun one. Kyler Murray for a quarterback.
Well, you got to buy in Kyler, right? He's not going to have a great year. Let me see where he's at here. I think he's averaged, because I have him in a couple of leagues, but I haven't started
2 touchdowns, 1 interception, he is in the top 5 in passing yards right now.
Yeah, it's what I thought it was. 19.8 points last week. These numbers are not Peyton Manning numbers by any stretch of the imagination. They're not Patrick Mahomes numbers. But the thing is that he's built a very, very good rapport with Larry Fitzgerald. Larry Fitzgerald looks, 35, 36 years old, certainly not playing like it. I had a guy offer me Curtis Samuel for Larry Fitzgerald in one of my leagues a couple days ago. I jumped on it because I really like Curtis Samuel. I think Curtis Samuel is going to, Curtis Samuel was taken 2 rounds before Larry Fitzgerald, so I'll go for that at the moment. But it's because Larry Fitzgerald's just has a great rapport so far with Kyler Murray. This kid is somebody who, first of all, is just a super talented athlete, drafted by the Oakland Athletics, late round pick, but still, obviously phenomenal in college, maybe a little bit undersized. We're not talking Doug Flutie undersized here, but certainly undersized. So he's going to have a few balls batted down. He's going to have a couple of times where he gets, the ball gets intercepted by the linebacker or by the defensive end. But by and large, he's looking really good. He's on a terrible team, so he's going to be throwing the ball almost all the time. Though I think they are going to use a baseball term, I think they're going to be careful with his reps. I think it's entirely possible that they spell him from time to time, especially if the team gets eliminated. You might see that him only not play a little bit more sparingly, because they've just got so much invested in him. And the last thing that I think that they're going to want to do is have him get hurt. That's not something we normally see in the NFL. This is not baseball. But something tells me that they're going to be a little bit careful with Kyler Murray because they invested so much into him. And he's such a talented kid. So I really like what's going on there. I think the arrow's pointing up. I was not sold on him coming out of college. I thought Daniel Jones was a superior quarterback. But I think this year, Kyler Murray's going to have more points than Daniel Jones because of the fact that he's got Larry Fitzgerald to throw to.
Well, we're going to find out very soon when it comes to a matchup between both, because Daniel Jones is now starting for the New York Giants. So we're going to see him in action going forward for at least some time. Even if he fails or even if he does poorly, we're probably going to see him put in there and kept in there instead of Eli Manning unless he gets hurt. Or Eli Manning could be a very good trade possibility in real life for the NFL, which in turn could make him a possible player once again in fantasy football. But that's definitely a wait and see. That's something down the road that we're going to have to talk about, maybe if that materializes and we'll see if Eli Manning, if he gets another opportunity one last time to go ahead and shine once again, if that's going to be the case.
Don't touch that dial. Wait, do people still use dials?
Check out what's been going on with the Pop Culture Cosmos Show and the PCC Multiverse.
The better that these Marvel films do, the higher the standards are going to be for not just other films in general, but other Marvel films also.
I think it's really hard to end a show with this many fans in a satisfying way.
That's the Pop Culture Cosmos Show.
And the PCC Multiverse.
Playing worldwide on radio 7 days a week and wherever you get your podcasts. If you have any questions for us, first off, you can always hit up Jasen Dutch at Voice from the Underground on their social media, or you can go ahead and hit me up, Gerald Glassford, at Pop Culture Cosmos, any point in time on any of our social media for both of us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, the whole 9 yards. And then if you want to email us any of your questions, definitely at any point in time, just go ahead and hit us up, isfantasyfootball@yahoo.com.
Well, actually, one thing I want to say, the biggest surprise of the week has nothing to do with fantasy. Boy, the Steelers got ripped off by the Dolphins on that Minka Fitzpatrick trade.
I heard about that.
Fitzpatrick was a first-round pick in 2018, but they gave him a first-round pick for that. They could. I was shocked that Miami got as much as a first-round pick for him. I thought when they said that when the rumblings first came out, which was very recent, like I want to say it was like Thursday night, there was started to be talk that Fitzpatrick might be on his way out. And there's a bunch of guys, by the way, who are like demanding trades right now. It's kind of sad. But wow, a first-round pick he's a good player. But Miami is going to have an arsenal of draft picks next year. So Miami's going to be bad this year, but you know what? I think, and especially since the Steelers are probably, it looks like now, not going to be the greatest team. Although you know, you never know with the Steelers. You know, Tomlin is a great coach, but it looks like they're probably going to be a 6-7 win team this year. Miami could have 3 picks, in the top,
top 12,
9, 11 picks. It could be interesting to see.
That'd be very interesting to see where that ends up. I mean, they'll need it because they are an awful team. 0-16 to me is a very real possibility for Miami at this point in time because they are just truly an awful team.
The antithesis of the 73 team.
Yes, exactly. I don't think any of the crew from there that always seems to celebrate when that last team gets defeated during the course of the season and popping champagne, I don't think they'll be doing this year.
It's so annoying. You know, and this is from a kid. I grew up a Dolphins fan. I loved Dan Marino. He's my favorite football player ever. Him and Walter Payton. But even I get annoyed by those guys. So I hope somebody does it soon.
There you go. But if
not
you
the
go,
Patriots, though. Not the Patriots.
Okay, fair enough. But if you go undefeated for the rest of the season, you know what? I think you should, as Chris Jericho would say, pop a little bit of the bubbly there for you, my friend.
That's right, Y2J.
There you go, Y2J indeed. But it's a great time. Anytime I get a chance to talk to you, let everybody know before we head on out about Voice from the Underground one more time on why they need to go ahead and check it out each and every week.
Well, this week we're going to do an interesting show. What we do is we take something from politics, we take something from pop culture, and we kind of smash them together and come out with something terrible. But you should listen to it because it's greatly terrible. This week, we're going to talk about the movie Crash, but just a really interesting film and a lot of social dynamics that were obviously prevalent then are still prevalent now. And we're going to talk about how that movie, how society has changed, if at all, compared to what we saw in that film. And if you haven't seen the movie Crash, definitely a movie worth seeing. And I don't know if you've seen that one or not, but very, very well done film. Terrence Howard, Matt Dillon, Sandra Bullock, the guy from Encino Man. What's his name? Ludacris is in. Brendan Fraser is that his name? You know, Ludacris is in that film. So, and that's what we do most weeks is we'll talk about comic books for half an hour, then we'll talk about Trump or the Democratic debates or whatever. And it's horrible. So listen.
Well, it was good enough to be a Best Picture winner, if I remember correctly. And even though it was a year that a lot of other films that, if you talk to a lot of people, they said that was probably one of the least deserving of all Oscar films. But I know you guys are going to probably touch on that subject when you talk about the film. Still a very good film. But, it just compared to whatever the competitors were in that race, I think that a lot of people.
Oh, please! They gave an Oscar to a film about a woman sleeping with a fish a couple years ago. I think Crash is definitely not the worst of those.
No, but like I said, it's just some of the things that I come across as far as that's probably one of the main reasons why I did watch the film. I thought it was pretty good. It's not one of the greatest films I've ever seen.
No, it doesn't even, honestly, when you said that, I totally forgot it won the Oscar. It doesn't even strike you as an Oscar-worthy film. It just strikes you as an important film. A film that talks about things that maybe are not super comfortable to talk about. And that's why we're going to talk about it, because people don't want to talk about it.
And that's a good thing indeed. When there's conversation, only good things can follow if that's the case, as long as it stays positive. And it tries to on Voice from the Underground. And, of course, my shows, if you want to check them out, again, Inside Sports Fantasy Football, I'm coming up later this week, hopefully with Chris Sardieri coming back for another round as we preview Week 3 in the NFL, plus also the Pop Culture Cosmos every Monday and Friday covering the latest news and trends in pop culture, plus also Lakers Fast Break. I just taped an episode, the second one, with TJ Johnson, also from Voice from the Underground, so you got to check that out this week as well.
I hate the Lakers, but I can't wait to listen to that because I'm sure you guys had a blast.
Absolutely. Once the internet got right, everything was all good. But my friend, it's been great talking to you again. Can't wait to have you on next week, recapping Week 3 in the NFL, also your picks for Waiver Wire and your thoughts on who people need to get for their fantasy teams going forward. It's always great talking to you again right here at Inside Sports Fantasy Football.